themselves come back from multiple goals down. This time, the opponent does it to them, and it's not just any opponent, it's the Flyers at PPG Paints Arena. Philadelphia scores the final 4 goals of this game. The Penguins led 3-0 after just 4 minutes of play, and the Flyers, though, took control almost immediately after the Penguins led 3-0 and continued to ride that out the rest of the way. Claude Giroux shoves in the winning goal with just a handful of minutes left. A regulation decision. Yes, regulation. One of those rare close games this year that's been decided before the end of 60 minutes. And when you know it, it goes against the Penguins. The Flyers jump back on top of them in the East Division standings, and they're now back 2 points ahead for that 4th and final playoff spot in said East Division. I'm Matt Gajtka with Alan Saunders. This is Pittsburgh Postgame after a stunning turn of events, a stunning result down there at PPG Paints Arena. Alan, as I said, the Flyers really were in control for, I guess, 55 minutes of this game. Weird thing to say, considering how long the Penguins actually led. And, yeah, the Flyers got lucky to tie it up, maybe. Claude Giroux's shot going wide, but it hit Scott Laughton and bounces in. But it's one of those things where, in the sport of hockey, sometimes eventually what you've earned over the course of the game does go your way with a late turn of events or two.
Yeah, I think this was a pretty even game. For most part, at 5-on-5, I thought the Flyers really made the difference in special teams. I don't think the Penguins were able to compete with what Philly was able to do on special teams, and I think that the Penguins' defense was okay for most of the game, but there were just some individual plays that were not very good in this one that ended up in the back of their net. But I think when you're not dominating teams possession-wise, and you're in a significant disadvantage on special teams, then you don't have the margin of error to make mistakes anymore, right? That's how you build the ability to say, like, oh, well, Jari's pass goes over Matheson's stick, and a tenth of a second later it's in the back of the net. Like, that happens. I don't know. Like, you can sit there and nitpick Jari. He generally does more good than bad when he goes out to play the puck. But that's just it's a very strange way to learn that lesson, because they go up 3-0. You say, well, okay, well, there's your advantage. But really, they didn't have an advantage in play at any point. They just had an advantage on the scoreboard. This was not a game that they were ever dominating. And I think if you're not going to win on special teams, and you're not going to dominate the possession of the puck, then you leave yourself vulnerable to mistakes costing you games.
The Penguins had that 3-0 lead, and they had a power play immediately after that too, Alan, and that's really highlighting your point in terms of special teams and how the power play, especially both aspects of special teams, have been bad this year, almost equally so if you look at league rankings and where the Penguins stand there. But tonight, it was on the power play. They had a chance to, well, at least pepper Brian Elliott a little bit more, maybe even chase him with a 4th goal. Couldn't do that. In fact, the Flyers had the better of the opportunities there on that power play, and then immediately following that. Then the Penguins had a power play in the 3rd period, too, up 3-2. Couldn't make anything happen. They just get the one measly chance. Jake Gensel, pretty decent look from a setup behind the net by Sidney Crosby, but one and done. Flyers clear, and there is really nothing else to speak of. So I know there were only 2 power plays for the Penguins tonight, but a lack of ability to seize control of the game in those situations. And yes, there were areas where the Penguins could have seized this one, even though, like you said, they didn't dominate. It was a pretty even game when you look at things at the very end by the final accounting. Malkin couldn't bury a chance in front off a pass from McCann. That was about, halfway through the 3rd period too. So even if you aren't exactly dominating, there are still chances to be opportunistic and pop one in. Didn't happen. And in a situation where the Penguins got Sidney Crosby back, when they got a goal from Mark Friedman, that's a bonus. He goes out for injury for the second part of that game. But a lot of things going their way, honestly, early on in this one, and they couldn't convert it. So in some ways, maybe you could look at it and say they've come back so many times that was bound to happen against them. But at the very least, you could say opportunities squandered here against a team they're directly battling for the final playoff spot. So that's what makes this one really hurt. For me, the toughest loss of the year, no doubt.
Yeah, and the Penguins are not built to be a team that sits on leads. Like, that's not the way this team is constructed. They don't have shutdown line, really, you could say. They don't even really have a shutdown defensive pair. They're built to – the team is constructed to play in the offensive zone. But they don't do – if they're not doing that, they're not really that good at holding leads. This is not a team that you can give a 3-goal lead and say, all right, just go play defense the rest of the game and you'll be fine. They have to have that possession. They have to have those dominant offensive shifts. Even though they got Sidney Crosby back, I don't know. It didn't seem like there was significant difference in the way the offense played today. I think they maybe played better last game offensively than they did in this one. So, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like they're connecting on all cylinders on offense. I think that's one of the ways out of this problem, the power play. I don't know. I don't know what answers there are to that problem that's been going on for so long. And, and you mentioned Friedman. I think playing with 5 defensemen at the end of the game certainly impacted them as well. And a couple of those situations where there were some poor coverage assignments, you had some mixed up pairs, which happens at times, and when you're only playing with 5. And so it's not really surprising to me that they kind of ran out of steam. Also, they don't play their fourth line. Played fourth line 5 minutes tonight. And so, defending is a lot harder than playing offense. If you're on the wrong side of the puck, and by that I mean, you're in your end more than you're in their end for the whole game. You're playing 3 lines and you're playing 5D. You're probably not going to be the better team at the very end of a hockey game.
You read my mind. That's exactly where I was going to go next, because part of the reason why the Penguins couldn't defend this lead is because they just couldn't play in the offensive zone enough. They had some rush opportunities, but actually the Flyers were smarter in this game. They didn't give the Penguins very much in the transition. I thought Philadelphia was over-aggressive in game 1 of this series, and the Penguins made them pay frequently. Today, the Flyers made them earn a little bit more, and even though Crosby's line, Malkin's line, they both were above the break-even point in shot attempts, in scoring chances, and expected goals. That's the first time in a while that both of those lines have been effective on the same night. But then you have the Teddy Bluger line, Bluger, Aston Reese, and Tanev, and they were well off the pace, about a 30% shot share on the night, and in terms of expected goals for and against, almost nothing generated offensively, and just buried in every way conceivable, the third line, on a night when you'd think that would be their night to shine, right? With a chance to play with a lead. They don't necessarily have to push the pace or push any kind of offense, but they just got killed tonight. And like you said, the fourth line is still non-existent. Just under 5 minutes, under 6 minutes, I should say, of even strength play. The fourth line had 1 good shift early in the third. The third line had maybe 1 or 2 good shifts in the second period when the Penguins started to find their footing for a brief moment late in that frame. But other than that, there was no opportunity for them to roll lines, or for, say, Crosby and or Malkin to jump over the boards onto the ice and take advantage of some momentum generated and some time played in the Flyers' end, and maybe capitalize on that attrition factor. So for me, Alan, that's where it really hurts. It's not the games when you're coming from behind, because you shorten the bench anyway, right? But it's games like this where you can't trust your bottom 6, and that's where I keep coming back to. That's the real weak spot. That's the thin spot on this roster. And for me, that's where the failure of this game is they just couldn't get those move the chains type of shifts from those guys.
Yeah, and I think that's you could look at some of the injuries and say, okay, maybe Jason Zucker gets back by the end of the year, maybe Evan Rodriguez comes back in the lineup, and that kind of fourth line figures itself out. But I just feel like there's too many passengers in general. Guys that don't have enough positive attributes. I say this, we both have a lot of experience covering college hockey and participating in college hockey. There's a lot of college hockey players that are it's just a guy, right? He just goes out there and skates up and down the wing, and he's like no real threat to score, not fast, not strong, just there, just taking a shift. And the Penguins have too many of those guys, just a guy, where the scouting report from the other team is just like, whatever. He's out there don't worry about what he's doing because probably nothing good. There's just too many of those guys, and Dominic Simone goes on waivers and unclaimed. I would say I would have made that move. I don't know what your thoughts are. I think he's more talented than probably maybe 4 or 5 guys the Penguins had in the lineup tonight. And God, what's the hurt? I mean, it's not like you have untalented players that are playing really well. You have untalented players that aren't doing anything. Why not shake it up?
Yeah, someone like that. I missed that totally. Thank you for the note on Dominic Simone being available. But someone like that fits in better on a team like the Penguins, where he can ride piggyback with Crosby and or Malkin and feed them the puck, play a little bit of a complementary role, and have their talents be elevated by playing with some superstar talent. I'm not terribly surprised it didn't work out in Calgary there because Simone didn't have a transcendent center to help him along. But I think he can be more valuable here in Pittsburgh than other places. Right now, too many empty jerseys at the moment. And I think you look at the defense core. For me, Alan, it's a pretty urgent situation. The Penguins are in a difficult spot right now. They already trail the Flyers when you look at games in hand. So even though going into tonight they were tied in the standings in points with Philadelphia, the Flyers had played 2 fewer games. So they were already in 5th place, regardless of what happened tonight. Now they fall further behind. And I think the onus is on Ron Hextall and Brian Burke to make something happen here. For me, it's trading a defenseman, at least one defenseman, to bolster the top 9, I guess we'll say. I think that's the most important thing. I'm not that I've given up on the 4th line being effective this season, but I just want to see 3 effective lines here. And no offense, Teddy Bluger or Zach Aston-Reese or Brandon Tanev, but they may be at the risk of getting a little bit overexposed here. If Bluger's your 4th line center, then you might have something. But as of right now, I think everyone's a little overextended at the moment. So does that seem like the most obvious solution to you to deal from that position of power? I like the Penguins defense core right now. I think it's fairly deep. I think it's among the best in the division, at least. So that's what I keep coming back to. And I feel like the time to make a move is sooner rather than later. How about you?
Yeah, and I think they have not only do they have a surplus of defensemen, but they have a surplus of the kind of defensemen that everybody wants, guys that can skate and guys that can play the puck. Those are generally, highly sought after assets. I'm not sure that, Mike Matheson's contract probably precludes him from being the kind of asset that he might be otherwise, but I think all the rest of their defensemen are guys that people would be interested to have on their team. The question is, they're not getting great defensive play in their own zone either. You look at a guy, P.O. Joseph, not in the lineup tonight, has shown a lot of promise, but he's not a stay-at-home guy either. I just feel like they have a talented defense that might not necessarily fit together very well. Overall, I think the play is very good, but I think there's been a couple times this season where we've seen what we saw tonight, where it was just some sloppiness, some guys in some really bad places that they shouldn't have been, and too many high danger scoring chances against. I feel like that's been a common theme for this team this year, is that you can make mistakes to the outside, to the point, whatever. You can't make mistakes in between the circles down low. And just too many times that's happening with this defense. I think they're talented players. I understand the fit. It's not working out as well as it should. And so when you compare that to the obvious need for forwards, any forwards, I think it makes a lot of sense. But you need a trading partner that wants what you have. And look, I mean, it's not like any of these guys are like blue chippers. They're good. It's a good, solid 1 through 7, 1 through 8 group. Chad Ruhwedel also not dressed, and Brian Dumoulin on his way back. But none of those guys are number 1 or number 2 defensemen on any team. Maybe Dumoulin is. And so are you going to get a top 9 player for those guys? I don't know. Maybe a third liner, not an impact guy. And then the big question becomes, is this team good enough to warrant throwing future assets into a trade in order to try to make it better? And I think that's the really difficult question that Hextall and Burke are going to have going forward, because I'm not sure they can make just pure hockey trades with the guys on the roster and make enough of a difference. I think in order for this team to get better, they would have to pull from the future, whether that's prospects or draft picks somewhere, which has already been done over and over again by Jim Rutherford. I think they'd have to do it again if they're going to make this team better.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from when I say there's urgency now. I'm operating from the premise that they think this team is worth improving to a certain degree in order to give them a better chance of not just making the playoffs, but making a run in the postseason too. So that may not be the universe, that may not be the world that Burke and Hextall end up operating in based on their perception of the team, even though Brian Burke has been on the record of saying that he's been impressed by the play of mostly the entire team since he's been there. It could just be a guy trying to pump the tires of his team as well. So you always want to take that into consideration. But he also doesn't seem like the type of guy who would necessarily do that very often. He seems like more of the blunt type. But hey, we're all getting to know him a little bit more intimately than we ever have. This is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. The live chat is open on YouTube, also on Facebook as well. And I do want to make a clarification there. When I say it's one of the better defense cores in the division, I think it has the potential to be. And I think when these players are clicking at their best, I think that there's a nice complement of offensive and defensive skills. But then again, you have a night like tonight with Matheson and Marino. Those two players were out there on the blue line when the Flyers scored. I guess you would say the two most egregious goals that the Penguins allowed tonight. You had the one where two Flyers are left wide open in front of the net to make it 3-2 in the second period. I don't know what happened there. Both Matheson and Marino and Evgeny Malkin, honestly, were out to lunch. No one picked up the blue paint. And then the final goal, Claude Giroux getting inside position on Marino. Marino, a much bigger man than Claude Giroux. But, hey, Claude knows how to score goals, and he took out the best of a sophomore defender in that situation. But I was optimistic about that pairing, but not a good night tonight for number 5 and number 6 together. Plenty of comments coming in on YouTube, so I want to get to some of those. Mark Honeyman, a new face and avatar over there, says it's depressing to put 3 on the board so early on just to watch it slip away. It was interesting, Alan. I was listening to the radio broadcast in the first period coming home from work, and Phil Bourque was pretty animated on the radio side, doing color analysis, of course, talking about how he didn't like how the Penguins handled that power play after going up 3-0. He felt they let the Flyers back in it, and I was thinking maybe Phil's overreacting here, but I understood where he was coming from. Philly's a team that can make it hurt. They have plenty of high-end talent, and well, lo and behold, he ends up being a soothsayer and how the Flyers took advantage of that. Do you think this one stings more or has more of a carryover effect just because of how it happened? Because in a situation like this where you play the same team now 3 times in a row, there's going to be more carryover, I would imagine, in terms of game to game. And it does feel like a playoff series in that way, doesn't it?
It does. I don't think it matters how you lose. I don't think nobody likes to lose. Doesn't matter how. But I think when you're losing the same way so many times, when the power play lets you down so many times, when the defensive positioning, and I don't know. Yeah, I think there can be some frustration set in there. I don't see it yet, but I can see the potential for it. You know, this is a frustrating team to watch. Like they have talent. You know, I think it's one thing when you're just not a good hockey team, or really any sport. If you don't have the talent level and you go out there and you just compete hard, I think it's one thing. You know, when you have the talent level to be really good and you're not, I think that's very frustrating. And so, look, maybe they need some frustration. I don't know. I'm not saying that's all bad, but yeah, I'd be frustrated if I was Penguins, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a psychoanalyst. I'll stick to the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. I think the psychology part of it is overwrought by the fans and media as it is.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot there, but it just felt like when you have a situation like this for a team that has stolen a lot of points, honestly, from losing positions. Then you have a game like this where you realize, oh, it's not always going to be us doing the amazing comeback story or authoring that sort of thing. So maybe in that way it could be a good thing, but I tire of that situation here because we talked about coming into this game how the Penguins needed to not have a letdown or anything like that with Crosby coming back in the lineup after having played well with sit-out when he was in protocol on Tuesday night. We've seen the Penguins not being able to handle prosperity very well on a larger scale, and it happened in a micro scale within this game today. The first time they've had a 3-goal lead in that stage of the game all season long. They hadn't had a 3-goal lead outside of the third period all year. So they look like a team that didn't have much experience handling that. And as we talked about, perhaps depth is the primary culprit there. Yeah, a lot of anger there on the YouTube chat, talking about character, talking about the psychology of things. And like you said, Alan, it's tough for us to really analyze that. I don't know where to go with that sometimes. I think that's a challenge for all of us on the outside. I think it's a challenge for people on the inside to figure out what's going on and if what's in one person's mind or another person's mind is that big of a deal. But I think we can agree that it's a team with some flaws on the roster, and even if you factor in the best version of some of the players that are out there, like Evgeny Malkin, if he were at his best, if Tristan Jarry were at his best all season long, it's still a team that has plenty of holes. So at this point, those two guys I just mentioned still trying to work their way back into fine form. So there's plenty to poke holes at right now, even if they're not a team that's going to fall out of the playoff chase altogether. I don't think, at least at this point. Let's talk Malkin, because he said after Sunday's game, the dud of a performance for almost everybody at New York on Long Island, 2-0 loss. He said he was close, and I kind of laughed that one off. I said, oh, come on, close. He's still making too many mistakes, and there still are some of those mistakes in his game, but I am seeing signs here, and he and McCann together with Crosby back in the lineup. I like he and McCann on the same line. There are many bright spots for that line tonight. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom tonight as well, because like I said, the top two lines were effective. They played more on the Flyers' end. They had their share of opportunities. They created a couple of goals, one each. So if you're looking for bright spots, or even if you're not, I think it's hard to deny that the two-star centers are playing better, in particular Malkin. So he just looks more lively to me. What are you seeing from him on the screen?
Well, I think he looks better with the puck than he did. He looks more confident. I think that's the thing. You could see him starting to look less confident on the puck, and I think that's changed. But I mean, he made a very poor defensive play that led to a Flyers goal tonight. And let's be honest. I don't care if Evgeny Malkin is just. Let's forget average. I don't care if he's bad at even strength, if he plays well on the power play. I mean, where he is on the power play, that power play success or failure, 80% lies in the hands of Evgeny Malkin and Crystal Tang. They're not getting it done. Like, you can pick and choose about who's going to be the shooter or who's going to go to the front of the net, but those guys have the puck more often than anybody else by a large margin. They make all the decisions, and that's where the power play is dying. And so as long as the power play is bad, and it's bad, I'm not going to say Evgeny Malkin is playing good, because that's what he's getting paid to do.
Well, yeah, it's hard to ignore that. And I almost hesitate to talk about the power play because I don't know where else to go with it. We discussed it with a couple of the coaches that I've had on the post-game shows, Greg Revac in particular, talking about how the Penguins are trying to have the puck do too much of the work. They're not moving their own feet. They're not getting into different positions. And we see it for flashes. And I was almost half joking the other night when I said I didn't like that the Penguins scored on some beautiful tic-tac-toe power play goal from Malkin to Gensel to Kapanen. It just felt like, oh, they're going to try to replicate that from now on. And limited chances tonight, just the two opportunities, but nothing encouraging there, and not coming through with anything to tilt the ice when they really need it. So I'm led to believe sometimes that that sort of maybe that fear on my part is rational in cases like that, because maybe they keep failing over and over again, they'll finally stop banging their heads against the wall. They'll get sick of inflicting pain and they'll try something different. but they're having just enough success once in a while that maybe they think they can work their way through it. But that's the frustrating part for me, is because guys like Crosby and Malkin and Letang have been through this before. They've been through power play slumps. They've seen what works, and it still doesn't get through their heads in a lot of ways. So can you make sense of that? Why that keeps happening? Is it just stubbornness? Is it guys who are in some ways forgetting what has made them successful in the power play in the past?
Or is it guys that just can't do what has made them successful on the power play in the past anymore? I think that's a fair question.
I disagree with that, though. The power play should be where older players can still thrive, right?
Should be, but these are not young guys. So I think it has to be a fair question. I mean, they didn't get dumber, right? Right? Like you don't get less intuitive about playing the game as you get older. I can't see that. So, I mean, look, I don't think they have as good of a supporting cast around them as they had, say, when they had Phil Kessel and Patrick Hornquist, right? Like, it's not that good of a power play with the other two players besides Crosby, Malkin, and Letang, but not that much worse either. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think I had hopes for the coaching change making a difference there. That clearly isn't it. There have been times, and this goes back years, that this group has struggled, and people talked about splitting up Crosby and Malkin. I would pull out all the stops at this point. It doesn't hurt to try anything. They've got to do something drastically different to me with this power play at this point.
How much of this this performance this season, ups and downs, not able to really sustain much of anything. Even when they win, they're giving up points. They trail so frequently early in games. That for me is at least partially an indictment of the coaching staff. I feel that this team shouldn't have to just rely on dramatic rallies and game-breaking plays in order to win. There's so much talk about Mike Sullivan being a good coach, and I think he is. I hear it from all corners of the coaching universe, honestly. So it's difficult for me to really figure out how much to pin on him, how much to pin on guys like Mike Vellucci and Todd Reardon, who, if we're talking about special teams, we should be talking coaching. We should be pinning a lot of that blame on the coaching staff because it's about scheme in a lot of ways. And the two sides of the special teams have come up extremely empty this year. So I think the coaching staff deserves a lot of scrutiny at this point. Hey, the GM stepped down. It's a new leadership group at the upper levels of management. So maybe the coaches should be feeling some pressure here in this situation too. I'm not saying it's necessarily a hot seat, but there could be a spot where perhaps Sullivan can take control of the power play from Reardon or the penalty kill from Vellucci. There's got to be some different way to go about this. And I'm also concerned about the fact there's not that much practice time. Barring some sort of another COVID delay, they're going to be playing games every other day and more often than that from here until the end of the season. So that's where I get pretty nervous about things, is because there's not that much of an opportunity to grab the bull by the horns here and try to turn this thing around. That's the problem for me, is there's no there's morning skates. There's perhaps a practice here and there. And for the most part, it's games. That's trouble if you're trying to correct a bad habit.
Yeah, listen, a lot of this has to be on the coaching when you're talking about special teams. It's all coaching. I mean, yeah, there's talent involved, but yeah, it's a lot, especially when we know that talent has produced in the very recent past, right? It's not like he's got the fourth line out there on the power play. They're not doing anything. We wonder why. And heck, even those guys would get more than 2 shots on goal. And so, yeah, I think a lot of it is the coaching. And also, like, you talk about Mike Sullivan. I think Mike Sullivan is a great coach. There have been 3 coaches that have won multiple Stanley Cups in the cap era of the NHL. Sullivan, Joel Quenneville, and Darryl Sutter. Quenneville was fired in the middle of his 4th season after his last cup. Sutter was fired after 3 seasons after his last cup. That's where Mike Sullivan is right now. And, like, I've always felt that of the major sports, coaching in hockey is the most fungible, right? Like, it is a more replaceable position than it is in other sports. I don't know why that is, but I feel like even great coaches reach a shelf life. I'm not saying that Mike Sullivan should be fired for where the team stands right now, but I certainly don't feel like he's earned a pass for this either.
Well, we're about to find out, I think, exactly how much scrutiny these coaches are under if things continue down this path and Penguins miss the playoffs here, then there's going to be a serious evaluation. Not that there isn't one already going on from the new guys on top in Burke and Hextall. If you were Burke and Hextall, and I'll leave the show at this one, Alan, then we'll step aside here. But from what you've seen through 4 games, something around that range here, almost halfway through the season, would you go in and try to make some drastic improvements to this year's team, or would you start trying to deal for some futures, get some assets, get some draft picks, perhaps some younger players? Because I feel like it's going to be a trade deadline where something happens, but I'm extremely up in the air on which way I would go. Which way would you lean? Would you lean more toward the following season and into the future? Or do you feel like, hey, this is your last best shot this year just because of the ages of your star players?
I think it's a difficult question to answer. I don't see anything from suggest they're capable of competing for anything of significance through 24 games. That doesn't mean that can't change, but I would have a hard time envisioning this team with changes X, Y, and Z winning the Stanley Cup. Like I just can't see it. And so if you can't see it, to me, I don't think you can make future moves. I think the best you can do is to try to just make a bunch of sideways things. It's very interesting to me that I think actually what this team needs is another one of Jim Rutherford's patented shakeups. Maybe they should have let him do it one more time before he left. Just throw 3 players into the trade machine and take whatever comes out and hope it works out better. I don't know if you saw his quotes from the podcast he did the other day about he doesn't try to win trades, which he actually said when he was in Pittsburgh, but he reiterated it, and it is just as dumb as it sounded the first time.
It was bad, yes.
But I think that's their best hope, right? Like I don't think you can justify putting future assets into this team. I also don't think there's a big advantage to like tearing pieces apart and casting them aside either. I think you just try to shake things up, which is another reason why I think coaching is on the table, because it's a lot easier to fire one coach than it is 25 players.
Yeah, and I think that has broken many a tie over the years, at least in NHL circles, when it came time to change something. That does make a lot of sense there. And I think a lot of things are in play right now. If nothing else, this most interesting franchise in sports in a lot of ways continues to be so about halfway through the shortened COVID season. I wanted to also mention T-Funk in the comments here notes that there have been 22 games played by the Penguins so far this season. They have 5 regulation wins, 5 in 22 games. So they're giving up points 3 out of every 4 times they take the ice. That's no way to make up ground. You don't have to be a mathematician to figure that out, but to just put that in stark relief, that's rather amazing, actually. And it does make you question, is this team actually closer to the bottom of this division in terms of true talent and true performance than it is to the top? I think in a lot of ways it's hard to argue that right now as they sit in 5th in points and not feeling like they're threatening to make any kind of significant move up the standings as of right now, even though the top of the East standing still remains very tight. So it's a paradox. Do they look great? No. Do they look like world beaters? Absolutely not. But
5 points out of first place.
Yeah, they're still a winning streak away from being in first. So I guess you try to play the hand you're dealt, and for right now, it's a pretty advantageous hand. Even though the East is strong, tough to get points, I would say. But also, if you can string together a couple of results, suddenly you're looking really good. So the Penguins try to turn this one around and try to reverse this result here. Saturday afternoon at PPG Paints Arena, the final of 3 straight games against the Flyers. Then they'll have the Rangers on Sunday night at 7:30. So the first back-to-back here at home, the Penguins will confront, and we'll have coverage for you here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Alan, thank you very much. You went above and beyond tonight to banter with me and our viewers here. coming to us from Richmond, Virginia. So we appreciate you on basketball duty, also squeezing in some pucks here late tonight.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's been fun, and missing scenic Richmond, but I've heard good things. I actually like it here. So maybe we could thanks to Duquesne for winning, so I get to check out the city for another day.
Yeah, there you go. I've been to Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia Beach, but never Richmond. So I guess that's on my list as far as Virginia is concerned. He's Alan Saunders. I'm Matt Gajtka. It's been our pleasure to talk Pens with you. And like I said, continued Penguins coverage coming up on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Just keep it right here. If you like and subscribe and sign up for the notifications, you know exactly when we go live with our next program. So talk to you that next time, whenever it may be, whenever you have the opportunity. Take a look at Pittsburgh Sports Live for coverage of all the teams in the area. We've got college, we've got pros, and we've got plenty of opinion on all of it as well. Talk to you next time.